I'd like to call the Community Infrastructure Service Committee to order, please. Do we have a mover on the consent items? Okay. No, Councillor Gazzola. Any questions? Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about the first item, the Motorcycle Country Riding Club in my ward. This is the first year, and I would just like to, I guess, ask staff about the extent of noise proposed, and I see it's going to 11 o'clock, and if we're going to be monitoring this or just dealing with it on a complaint basis.
Through you, Mr. Chair. This is the first year we're having it. We do have somebody who will be on site there and has provided us with their information should we have any noise concerns. So at this time, given what they're proposing, we don't anticipate anything beyond the usual.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
I just wanted to ask some questions on the donation policy. Mr. Chapman, it's income tax rulings. How will this work in the future? Like, from what I understand, in the past, people gave money to organizations. Did we issue receipts on those?
Yes, we're one of a decreasing number of municipalities that actually provide this service. Yeah. We thought that CRA might tell us to cease and desist, and what they've said is that we can continue so long as we receive all of the donations. Presently, for smaller donations, we'll accept a list with copies and we'll issue the receipts on that basis. But also Council must pass a resolution indicating that if it's donated for an affiliated group, it will go back to that group.
So how will that work now? Will you, when you get a donation, you'll just pass it along to the organization?
We'll probably do it quarterly, so we'll batch them, and then at the end of the quarter, we'll reconcile and make that payment to the group. Okay, and the other question I had is, this works for almost any like, if a councillor wanted to give a donation to a community center, this would work in the same fashion, right? If they are a neighborhood association on our approved affiliated list, yes, that would. Yeah, as long as it's whatever it is, it's something affiliated with the city, or even a person can give money to the city itself, make a donation, right? They could, yes. Yeah. I like what it is, and I'm glad that we are doing this because I think it's a good tool, and it gives people an opportunity to do things and get income tax credit for them. Thank you.
We have no more questions. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. First item up on discussion items is item number 3, Creative Enterprise Initiative CEI update. And we have Mr. Regier to give us an update, please.
Thank you, Chair Ioannidis. This report, CAO 13041, is for information purposes. It helps inform the decision related to the recommendation for funding for CEI, the administrative funding, which is recommended for no change in the amount of $56,000 for 2014. This is coming to you in the next report, CSD 13109. Last year, Council asked for an update on the financial situation with CEI as per the budget cycle, and CEI provided a couple of stakeholder presentations, one on August 28th and the second on September the 4th. The report outlines some of the accomplishments for the past year, which include the launching of Grand Social, a region-wide website which highlights events related to the arts across the region on a regular basis, and provides other support services to the arts organizations here in the region. We also have seen a tremendous amount of activity related to support infrastructure for arts organizations, mentoring, and market development, and so on and so forth. So CEI Heather is here. Heather Sinclair is here to answer any questions if you have for this report or the second one.
Thank you, Mr. Regier. We have questions. Councillor Singh?
Is Ms. Sinclair going to come as delegation as well, or she? Are you? I wasn't sure if she is coming.
Yep.
Does she have a presentation?
No, she doesn't have a
Oh,
presentation.
she doesn't? Oh, okay.
No, I don't have a presentation.
Okay,
She's
I wasn't
here to
sure.
address
I
questions.
was going to hold on to my question until I heard you. I wasn't sure if you were going to speak or not, so thank you. So a quick question of staff. As to the report, at requesting continuation of the funding to Creative Enterprise Initiative and going forward 56,000. That's already built into the base budget for 2014?
That's correct.
Okay, and it also says the organization has raised private funds of 340,000. Is that speaking to 2013 calendar year or previous year?
That's annual. That's an annual funding commitment from private sector sponsors.
That they've already done. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. And quickly, actually, this may be a question to Ms. Sinclair. I would appreciate. So this is directed more towards you. Thank you so much. And in previous years, you've come before council and made a presentation as to the benefits and the needs of this organization and this community, and the requirement of ongoing funding to the organization as well, apart from the per capita funding that this corporation has already been doing so over the last few years. And certain targets have been set previously for private monies raised, as funding raised. Last year was how much total?
Sorry, the target
What was the target, or how much was raised?
was $340,000 from the private sector, and that's in annualized commitments. So that
Okay.
goes out to the end of 2014 and
2014.
then into 2015.
And is that
Some
going
of
to be still the same for end of 2013?
It's
Or
the same for 2014, and we've got staggered.
no,
sorry.
I get
Yeah.
you about the ongoing commitment by these, current
Yeah.
businesses that you have, that they made that formal commitment. But I'm sure you're still going out there to further
Oh, yeah.
businesses.
Yes.
So have there been further, headway?
There's
increasing?
been, we're shifting tacks a little bit. We're continuing on that in terms of those leadership council members and the multi-year commitments at $15,000 a year for a minimum of 3 years. So we continue to move on that, but there's two other tacks that we're taking more aggressively right now. One is that, and it's not out in the public yet, we haven't marketed it yet, but we've started to do it, which is a different level at corporate membership, so that those organizations that can't commit to the $15,000 level can come in at either $5,000, as Perimeter Institute and Communitech and other ones have, or at a lower price point, so that we can get a much broader base. And we've started that actually last week. And then we've also got, if you want to call it a summit or a meeting, that Roger Farwell and I are setting up in January. And the tack that we're taking there, in addition to the more philanthropic investment, if you will, is diving into the for-profit. So really just starting to focus increased energies and efforts into figuring out what that business model will be that will generate a dividend that will go back into the community.
Okay, great. And in this package, I'm missing to see, is there a financial report for your organization, or no, that's?
It's in the 2012 audited financial statements were included in the package that was submitted, I believe. It's not attached. It's not attached.
All report number 5, okay, all right, good. Can you just remind me, so that it don't take time looking
okay.
for it, what's committed by the City of Waterloo and the region and Cambridge?
Oh, yep. City of Waterloo. I think it's City of Waterloo is 33,000 in operating. and
Just more on
12.
just more on the operating end.
Okay.
Yeah.
And City of Cambridge has not contributed to operating yet.
Okay, and City Waterloo was the same as last year as well, so it was 30.
It is, and the recommendation from them this year is that they're increasing that by another $10,000 or more.
And the region?
The region is status quo. The region is 100,000.
100,000.
Yeah.
And again, because I don't have that, it's here somewhere. What's the total operating budget for the organization?
From those,
For
from the
Creative Enterprise.
For overall, 740,000.
740,000.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Councillor Gazzola.
I have some questions. The first question I have of staff, is there no way of getting this information to council other than in the printed form? There are 37 pages of stuff. Seems to me, I guess there's no answer to that. Are these just monitors, or can we get information up on them? Are we able to get something like that up on our monitors, as opposed to having all these pages in our package?
Can anyone address that?
Sorry, the actual monitor is run by my station, so I could upload the report to you so that you could view it on screen, but then everybody would be viewing the same page at the same time. So the 37-page report, you would have to ask me to scroll through it.
Okay, that's the sort of thing I was wondering. So yeah, we wouldn't have, we don't have the individual capability to look at whatever we wanted, but it is, okay, I guess that's another issue, because I see more and more of these. We have tons of paper that it would be nice to have it in some other format.
Okay.
Now, questions. I went through all 37 pages. This is a brief. You talk about a world-class place. Can you define what a world-class place is? We want to make the Waterloo region a world-class place.
Who are you addressing to,
unfair
Councillor
question,
Gazzola?
or
Are you addressing this to, who are you addressing this to?
to Ms. Sinclair? It was in this big long report.
Okay.
I guess quickly, I would say that where we aim for is that we are, it's a complex question, I guess, but in terms that we are holding our own in terms of the artistic and cultural and offerings that we provide in the community, that they would be viewed as being relevant in any city around the world, which is not a great answer, I know, but
Okay, that's a good try. Thank you. I've always had concerns with the organization, and to me that I see it as a duplication of effort, and I don't quite, maybe I'm missing the point, but it seems that you're used to funnel monies to other organizations, and we have other organizations that seem to do the same thing. Now, am I wrong in that, or?
yes, I would say that it's not a duplication in effort, that the programs and services that we provide are unique. The mentoring that we're providing in terms of grant writing, sponsorship, marketing, they are absolutely specific to the clients that we deal with.
But
as an example of some of them that we do, we know that we're having impact.
When I see organizations that you deal with, such as Neruda and Kafka and things like that, and then I look on our grants, and we deal with those too. So
sure, but what we're offering, for example, with the mobile ticketing service, is a service that works for everybody. So right across all the different arts organizations.
Go ahead, Mr. Wilmer.
Through the chair, I think one other thing that may not be clear here, and Heather's said this from time to time as well, is that CEI is not a granting organization. So that's a key difference, I think, is when the city is supporting, say, Neruda, we give them a grant. When CEI is supporting Neruda, it's providing services and advice and guidance and coaching to help them build capacity. So CEI is not and doesn't want to be a granting organization.
Support staff. Somewhat.
It's sort of the same thing, though. It's a roundabout to, we could have given Neruda the money and had them go and get the help somewhere. But that's fine. You show organizations. I always ask you this every year, and I'm going to ask it again. But I want to know where the 4 townships in the city of Cambridge are, and are they ever going to come to the table?
They are not investors right now. Roger Farwell and I do have a meeting in Cambridge actually next week to begin that conversation, not begin it, but continue the conversation with the new people that are in office there now.
Because I notice in your programs, I notice the New Hamburg Live and the Cambridge Citizen and something else. So there are activities that affect those municipalities, but they don't contribute.
If I could comment on that?
You may.
Thank you. We also attract audience members from those communities, so it's important that when we're reaching out and helping to market and promote what we're doing in the Cambridge Citizen, it's to bring people to the Kitchener area and our events here as well.
Do you get financial support from Communitech, Perimeter Institute, Laurier, Wilfrid Laurier, the University of Waterloo, and the Accelerator Center? Do you get?
Yes, we do. Except for Wilfrid Laurier, where we've had some in kind, but we get financial investment from those other entities that you mentioned.
I looked. Your financial statements are here. They're on our page is 564. I noticed, but there is no budget figures for us. You said your operating expenses for this year are $740,000, and last year the audited figures were for $559,000. That's quite a jump. What has happened?
That would be increased private sector investment.
So that's on the revenue side. What happened to your expenses that jumped up by 20-30%?
Sorry, which page are you looking at?
Well, I'm looking at page 564, and it shows expenses for last year at $559,000.
Yeah. It's in direct relation to the investment that we get in the organization. We put it all back out into the operations of what we do in our programs and services. So we've received increased private sector investment, and we've turned around and expended it.
How?
What do you mean, how?
Well,
I'm sorry, yeah.
No, all of a sudden you've got an extra $200,000. What did you do with the $200,000?
A number of different programs that we offered. We increased our mentoring, we increased our marketing and awareness around Grand Social. Every investment that we did in Grand Social by the end of December, we will have promoted over 500 events on Rogers Radio through our entertainment report that we do 4 days a week. So initiatives like that.
Do you receive any income from that Grand Social?
No.
There's no advertising?
No, we haven't monetized the site.
You're like Twitter. You got lots of followers, but nobody's advertising.
Part of our strategy is to grow those followers to the point where, if and when we consider that route, that we've got enough of an audience base.
Okay, just the last point I have. Looking at I'm working from your December 2012 statements, and I look at community support. Community support was only about $150,000, and is that what you got from the 22, 30? Well, it would be almost 30 people that are listed on our page 337. Is that what that is?
It's the increase in private sector, yes.
Well, it's everything. It's not just the increase, it's community support. If you look again on page 564, community support is 157,000. I'm just trying to equate it. Would it mean that each one of those organizations contributed $5,000 or so? Does that sound right?
In terms of looking at the
Operations.
I'm just trying to compare where the money's coming from.
between private sector and municipal?
No, I can see that. My question is it right that each one of these organizations contribute about $5,000?
No, the Leadership Council members are $15,000 each of 3 years. There are memberships ranging between $350, which is part of our new corporate membership program, up to $5,000 at a larger organizational membership.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yes, and just for clerk's purposes, I can still override the system, so I think eventually you'll have to change it over to Councillor Arnaitis to do that. I can't get into the queue, which is okay for today. I'm just wondering if, Ms. Sinclair, are you going to be sticking around for when we deal with number 5 as well? Are you here for the afternoon?
Yes.
Okay, well then I have some questions with regards to the Sustainability Fund for CEI at that point, but I don't have any on the operating grant. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thanks very much. And Heather, a couple of questions. What's the response been like from the business community when you do your pitch to them in terms of their interest and support?
There are probably three or four different responses. The overwhelming response with the Leadership Council members that we have on board to date is that they get the need to invest, and it's probably an easier conversation. In the past year, we've had some difficulty with some potential investors who have expressed concern about where some of the dollar per capita has gone. There was and continues to be a sense that the dollar per capita funding came to creative enterprise, that all of it came to creative enterprise. So, and it's still something that we deal with. And so until they really understand clearly that it did not come to us, the full amount, because their concern is that they don't see that there's been drastic change in the community with where those dollars have impacted, is their perception. So part of the conversation that we have is that they're challenged with investing because they're not seeing some dramatic shifts or changes, systemic changes in the community, is their perception again. So it's made it challenging for us to close those opportunities.
Fair enough. And so that begs the question, what's your response to them saying that there's no systemic changes?
We talk about the changes that we've been impacting with the dollars that we have invested. And then it's part of our rationale for looking towards moving into a for-profit business so that we can really tackle it in a parallel stream as we continue to have those other conversations.
Let's talk about Grand Social for a minute. I see some interesting numbers here. What has your anecdotal response been like from the community, and how do you market this in terms of sharing that this is a one-stop shop?
We've had some great response from the community initially, I think. It's been, since we've launched it, and the numbers speak for themselves, over 2,000 events on the site, 900 registered users, 500 venues or places where cultural things happen. So that's been great. We've started to see an increase through social media in terms of cross-promoting the site and driving up our numbers on that. In terms of it being a one-stop, like just a completely one-stop place, I'm not sure that it will ever be that definitively. We're always going to have people that will go to the Kitchener-Waterloo Record to look at the listings. We'll always have people that pick up different forms, and we work complementary to other vehicles. So that's a positive, I think. It's definitely taken off in terms of being a go-to place. And we've also seen some great results in terms of talent attraction. I know that with individuals that I've worked with directly at Communitech, I was very involved with the director of PR that they just brought in from Washington in terms of that hire. And the first thing they sent him was a package that outlined Grand Social. Likewise at Perimeter Institute with the new hire that has moved here from Chicago. So it is a tool that people are actively using. We've also been having meetings. We were just up at the HRPA, the Human Resources Professional Association meeting. They have them monthly, and we attended one of those. And it was also a tool that we need to do more one-on-ones like that. So in spite of the places where you can get it, we still need to do some of that one-on-one because only some of them were aware of it. But they saw it as a great tool to promote to their base as well.
It's an excellent point that this is part of a welcome package, if you will, to new doctors in the tech sector and the Chamber of Commerce. Are they using it as such?
It's the Chamber of Commerce. I'm actually not sure. That's a good question. I'll follow up with Ian. And we are the Doctors Association. I forget the name of the group that's pursuing that. That's on our list to go and get it integrated there as well. It's something that with the professional services package or membership that we're offering out to the corporate community, part of it is around the benefits of Grand Social for talent retention and attraction.
I think that's a competitive advantage we really need to play up because that really encapsulates the conversation about why this community has so much going on. If you can point to that, then it just is a shortcut. So I think that's a great thing that we should do more of. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Heather. Welcome back again, Heather. A couple of questions. Have you done any research to determine if cash commitments going to Creative Enterprise Initiative would, in other years before you arrived, have gone directly to local cultural groups?
We've done direct research one-on-one, if you will, with the people. I know it's been stated in the past, the comment that we're taking away, and every time we've asked that question, we don't get any validation of it. I'm aware only of one instance where that happened, and I know that I believe that they followed up and did invest back into that organization in addition to Creative Enterprise. So whenever we've tried to validate that question, we've never got a confirmation other than that one instance.
But that would be from groups that are asking you for financial support. So they're not likely to ask that question or bring it up. Am I correct? Or
no, I'm not understanding that, no.
If I'm part of a cultural group coming to you and I believe that some of the CI money is going to replace money I would have had before, I'm not likely to ask you that question.
I'm still not understanding the question. If a cultural group comes to us?
If I was coming, well, your answer to the first question was that you have not heard any such suggestion from the groups that you're in contact with.
No, from the private sector, okay. When we have the conversations.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your answer. On page 3.8, in what I call a column by you, or comments from you, you mentioned that since 2010, the CEI board and staff have delivered over $6 million in net new cumulative investment into the region's cultural community. How has that $6 million been invested in the local cultural community?
Well, close to $3 million of it is related to the dollar per capita, and so that would be not determined by Creative Enterprise.
Right.
And the rest of it is documented in much of what you've seen here in the handout in terms of where the investments have gone, both into services like the mobile ticketing or the studio or mentoring.
And how much of that has gone directly to cultural groups, as in your $10,000 to $15,000 grants to various groups?
Well, we don't grant, and we don't grant as a matter of course. So it's a varied amount that goes from year to year. We did not repeat that pilot investment program that we did. And we've provided a good amount of effort went into launching Grand Social and into marketing that, which has a larger, wider impact in terms of the breadth and depth of audience development that we're building on. So programs and services like that.
And I think I've asked this before, but other than out of the total money that you have at your disposal, what percentage goes to pay your staff? How many staff do you have?
Well, up until 3 months ago, there was 2.5 of us, or 3 of us, and we've just brought on 2 contract individuals on 1-year contracts, a director of marketing and a director of community integration and planning, who also does a lot of mentoring. So it's all staggered. I don't have the number per se. There's only 2 full-time employees, which is myself and a project coordinator. Everyone else is on contract.
Do you know offhand how much you spend on salaries and benefits? I saw a figure in here of $93,000, but I doubt that's the total.
No, it's more than that. But the money that we put into it's I'm not sure where the line of questioning is going, because the money that we put into salaries and benefits is directly back out into the community in terms of programming and mentorship and marketing that they do. So when Lori Bianchi is on as director of marketing with over 15 years experience, she's working directly with organizations. So whether it's Neruda, whether it's you name it that she works with, Jazz Festival, Lost and Found, whatever, that's a service that's being provided into the community.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, Heather. I'm going to just jump to the questions about Grand Social, and I've been using that as a tool to suggest to people who complain to me that there's nothing to do in this city. I say to them, just take a look at this, and there's lots to do. Have you been, and I think you said something about 900 users, is that what?
Yes,
so
registered.
Registered users, yeah. So that's not like hits, that's just...
Oh, no.
No.
Yeah. Those are people that are, in order to upload information, you have to register.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Last year, I remember you talking about leveraging some money that you would hope to get from the private sector. And where are you with that? Are you as far as you wanted to be, or do you still have a ways to go? Can you help me understand?
In general or specific to Grand Social?
In general.
Oh, no, we're not where we want to be at all. And we continue to push away at it, and as I just mentioned, coming up with new ways to go after that, and new ways to engage as much of the community at varying levels of investment that work for perhaps a small business, or where they're not able to, where they don't have budgets where they could put a $15,000 membership in. So we continue to come at it in various ways. We're also going to be looking at sponsorship next year in terms of another source of revenue for Creative Enterprise. Now that we've built up more of a base and a foundation, we have things that we can sell. And so that's what we'll be doing.
Can you speculate on why you haven't gotten there? I mean, some of it you said was you're trying different avenues and different tactics and different strategies. Is there something else that you think, gosh, if we could only do this, or is that just too simplistic?
I don't want to say it's too simplistic. Do I have lots of ideas about how we could crack that better? Yes. It would require, if we had a physical building, I know, for example, and I don't want to draw comparisons with Communitech and Accelerator Center, but if you have a physical building like that, I know I can't remember their number in their last annual report, but I think it's around $5 million in sponsorship that they do. And that's signage all around the building, that's, sponsoring their programs, and they're, over 16 years old, so it takes time to build that asset base, and I know that we'll get there in this community. We have a space in Waterloo, and we're constantly looking at spaces in Kitchener, an opportunity there, and I know we'll get there.
Okay, great. Just in looking at your budget on 564, to me, and my more naive background in finance, it looks to me like you're if you can say you're in a better deficit than you were last year. 2011 you were at 78, 2012 you were at 29. So it looks to me like you're getting better.
It's a challenge in this statement of operations because it's really about cash flow. So we don't operate on a deficit ever. It's really just about cash flow and the way that we have to report within this particular system.
Okay. I certainly admire the fact that you're coming back and asking basically for the same amount that you asked for last year, and correct me if I'm wrong, just slightly above what you asked for for 2012, the same as the 2012. So the last 3 years, you're asking for exactly the same amount, 56,000 for operating.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Councillor Verbanovich.
Thanks. Thanks for coming in today. A number of my questions have been asked already, and clearly there's a lot of good work that's been done here. I just want to explore the issue of the box office, because it's an area that I guess obviously is very much in need by everybody, but at the same time I sort of see three sets of box offices competing with each other right now. We have the Center in the Square box office, we have yours, and we have the one at the Conrad Center. It's not making a lot of sense to me, I guess.
So what we're trying to do we're not trying to compete on that level at all. What we're trying to do is offer a service right now that will work with the small to mid-sized organizations that don't have staff or don't have, that just fits that sweet spot right now. And I continue to be in conversations with Sandra Bender and Center in the Square on that. Their system isn't something that we could plug and play in right now. We couldn't help Empty Space go into the Conrad Center. We couldn't help Neruda. We couldn't help, right now we're working with the Uptown Comedy Festival. We're actually having people come to our offices as a footprint for them. And the mobile ticketing service is not competitive at all to those other services. So right now what we're doing is offering that and continue to have conversations that are much more complex in terms of how we could potentially as a community have a more integrated approach to it. But right now it's not plug and play for these small to mid-sized festivals to go in there. And it's expensive.
And you're saying it's not because the systems of those other institutions don't allow for it?
They could allow, Each one is complex. So to give a very specific example, with the Conrad Center, the reason that it was helpful for Empty Space to have our mobile ticketing there was because when you've got walk-up for cash and debit and credit, to enter it into the Conrad Center system, you can't trick the questions. You have to answer all the questions, which they do, rightly so, for database development, and they do it for Symphony patrons and so on. But it's a long process. So we were helping to alleviate one of the challenges that Empty Space had 2 years ago when they had a very long lineup and the curtains were about to come up, and people were frustrated because they couldn't get in the door on the time for the opening of the show. So we're dealing with a unique situation like that, where you've got the last-minute walk-up, and with Center in the Square, it's a much longer conversation and one again that's complex in terms of service charges that are there on top of the ticket prices. And when you're dealing with small to mid-sized festivals, that maybe they've got a lower price point, and then it becomes a bit more onerous when you've got a service charge. That's just one example, and these are the conversations that Sandra and I are having about, are there opportunities to lay that off? And it also, their system, it's worked very well for the Registry Theatre, and that's one example. And so we continue to look at what are other ways that we can work together. So it's not that we're developing something that's completely complex or competitive to them right now.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, in terms of the long-term sustainability of everybody, I think it's in everyone's interest to not be duplicating things, quite frankly.
Yep.
And so I would like to see, because especially when folks like Registry can make it work, I would think other mid-sized players at the very least should be able to make it work. And so we need to figure out a way of how that's going to happen, as opposed to, I think, quite frankly, your energies could be spent doing other things supporting the arts and culture sector, as opposed to necessarily on that.
It's happy to come back and talk more about that. It's the Registry is a venue. It's very different than when Empty Space is doing something in Victoria Park, which Centre in the Square can't service Victoria Park. We also had conversations with the museum, and more than happy to have us go in at the museum, but their doors close at 5. Or they'll be selling their venues most of the evenings to other activities and so on. So we are conscious of it and very much looking to find a collaborative solution.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. And just to follow up from some of Councillor Etherington's questions, I wanted to confirm. So you started out with 2.5 staff, and you said that you how many staff are you at now, full-time?
2.
You have 2 full-time staff, okay. And how many contract positions do you have?
1, 2, 3, 4.
4. Okay. So when I look at wages and benefits of contracted staff on page 564, what exactly does that mean then? Like, what is that? Because it looks like it's gone down from 2011 to 2012, but that's probably not representative.
Well, 2012 there was like one full-time person, which was me in 2012, and a couple of contract people that came in and out, and a summer student. Sorry, you're saying it looks like it's gone. Okay. Could you repeat your question? Sorry.
Okay. No, I think that's fine. So then we can expect to see that number go up then when we see the 2013 results. We can expect to see this wages, benefits, and contracted staff figure of $93,000 go up significantly when we get there 2013.
Yes, although some of the dollars are into programming and services.
Okay, so you put some contracted staff members
under
program services.
For instance, 2 contract people, if one of them is 100% full-time on marketing and audience development with Grand Social, then that's a full-time programming service. They're not doing any admin.
Okay, and that's the director of marketing. You also said director of community integration. Is that the other one?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Those are all the questions, Ms. Sinclair. Oh, Mayor Zaire?
Sorry, I was just looking at that same statement, or the financial statement on 5-64, and I think if I'm reading, Heather, you correctly, there are some salary and wage costs in the program costs of $293,000,
Correct,
and in
yep.
the 93,000. But that isn't broken out. So I think that's the essence of the question here. In total, what are the salaries and contract wages? And that might be just an extra figure that you could calculate and send to us.
Okay.
Of the total 559,000 expenditure, how much was salaries and wages?
Okay, those are all the questions. Thank you, Ms. Sinclair. Do we have anyone to move the recommendation? Isn't there one? Okay, that's it. Up next is item number 4, 2014 community grants. I'm not sure who's going to be providing the remarks. Miss Woodcock. You're on that. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and councillors. We are pleased to be here today to provide the staff recommendations to Council regarding community grants for 2014. The community grants budget provides funding for community grants tiers 1, 2, and 3, in-kind facility grants, and travel assistance grants. All of the community grants addressed in the report that you've seen provide support for community groups or individuals in the areas of arts and culture, special events, sports and recreation, and/or community support and development. Staff used various methods to process the community grants. A multi-year agreement process for Tier 1 grants, a defined application processes for Tier 2 grants, in-kind facility grants, and travel assistance grants, and a collaborative approach with other funders for the Tier 3 grants. The details of these processes are contained in the staff report. The grants we're speaking about today support multiple strategic priorities in the City of Kitchener's strategic plan, namely quality of life, leadership and community engagement, diversity, and dynamic downtown. In summary, the recommendation before you is that, subject to final 2014 budget approval, the 2014 budget for community grants, tiers 1, 2, and 3, in-kind facility grants, and travel assistance grants be set at $2,027,404. The allocation of that budget is delineated in the recommendation in the report. There are no delegations today, as no groups registered to speak to their grant requests for 2014. And we have staff here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Woodcock. Councillor Yanecki.
It's Yanetsky.
Yanetsky.
I wish to declare a conflict of interest in regard to page 4-9, Kitchener-Waterloo Community Orchestra, as I'm a member with that orchestra, even though they're not requesting any increase at all.
On page, oh, that's the very first item? Okay. Councillor Gazzola.
On page 4.2, there's a discussion of something about the payout to the Blues Festival. What is that?
Mr. May, do you care to address that?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, I can certainly take a shot at it, and staff can follow up if I don't provide the complete details. The Blues Fest has, over a number of years, received their grant upfront at the beginning of the year. That's not in line with how we do most other grant allocations. They made a request about a month or two ago to continue to receive that on a formal basis. And so we're simply red flagging that it is our intention to continue to provide them with their grant the way they have over the past, I think it's 3 or 4 years. There is some financial risk to the municipality by paying up front. Should, for any reason, the Blues Fest not happen, we would lose that grant. But staff are satisfied that that's a minimal risk.
So how much up front do you pay them? Like all the other organizations, you pay them after the fact, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think Ms. Willems could provide full details on the payment schedules.
Sorry, Go right ahead, Ms. Moms.
Through the chair, the payment schedule varies for the grants. Normally, the cash grants under $12,000 are paid after final budget approval. Any larger grants are either paid monthly, or there's one CAFCA that receives it twice a year. However, in-kind grants, whenever there's an in-kind grant in play, that's not paid as a cash grant. It's services provided, and that is held back until the event is done. For the Blues Festival, we have paid the full amount. It's approximately $40,000 after council approval in cash. We have not held back the in-kind portion, which is about $15,000 to $20,000, and then after the event, we invoice this organization, which is not the norm for in-kind grants. We usually hold those back.
Well, and that's what I'm driving at. Why would that be different from them? Because the in-kind normally is really...
It was agreed to by the staff at the time in special events that they would receive that, and there is, I believe, a representative from the Blues Festival here. Oh, sorry. There's someone here to speak to why they might want to have that all up front.
You may proceed.
I don't think they really have to speak. If I were them, I'd like it all up front too. So there's no, there's no. I don't know what the rationalization is.
Go ahead. Can you please state your name and?
Okay, the Blues Festival has a budget of about $1.25 million, and a significant portion of our expenses must be paid out in advance of the festival to artists and for infrastructure. And basically, if we don't get support in advance of the festival from our granting partners and our sponsors and our patrons, and even our volunteers, then it's very difficult to put on the festival.
Okay, that's fine. That answers my question, that you have to pay a lot of things in advance, and therefore you'd like to get your money in advance. That's
Excuse
fine.
me. Sorry, Councillor Gazzola, to interrupt you. Can you please state your name for the record?
Oh, sorry, my name is Hugh McCall. I'm the treasurer of the festival.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. On 4.7, I see we're giving CAFCA $5,000 extra. I know there was some 2-year plan. Does that mean that they got $5,000 less last year?
Through the chair, yes. The additional $5,000 in-kind grant was approved only for event years. So every other year they receive that, and then it goes back to the original amount.
Okay, so they received less last year, there's no details now because you've changed the way minor hockey receives its grant. Well, I didn't support the change that was made back in May. Is there, and that's been taken completely out of here, is there any way of knowing what their grant was and what it's going to be this year?
Go ahead, Bob.
Through the chair, we can supply information concerning what their amount was last year. As for this year, it would need to take a look at the number of hours through completion of the fall component of their season, and then looking at the January through to the spring component of this season to give you a full evaluation.
Okay, and I asked for that back when we dealt with this, and I hope that will be forthcoming so that we've changed the method of doing things so that we can sit back and have a look at exactly what happens. Okay? Thank you for that. The only other question I have is, I get a little leery sometimes when there's no increase asked for. I was looking at some of the minor sports. Does that mean they've been getting too much? It's a theoretical question. Okay. I'll leave that with you. Thank you.
Mr. Wilmer, you have a question?
Actually, it is a good question, and I think the reality is that once they become aware that the most they're going to get is something like 1%, they quickly come to the realization it's not worth their time to argue for it. So they are content to let the numbers ride.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to ask on 4.8 about the Kitchener Horticultural Society, and I'd like to acknowledge Mr. Bruce McNeil in the audience, the president. The question is regarding the higher wage and utility costs. So could you speak to that, please? Hey, staff, sorry. And Mr. McNeil may wish to come down as well, but what staff's understanding of that?
Mr. McNeil, can you please state your full name for the record?
It's Bruce McNeil.
Thank you.
And I'm president of the Hort Society. Typically what we do is, for the staff that we have, we provide the same increase that City of Kitchener staff have, and that's what we've done. And with utilities and so on, what we try to do is we try to match. We try to make sure that we predict exactly what we're going to need for the coming year. And last year, you'll probably see that we spent considerably less than what we're anticipating this year. And the reason for that is one of our fountains was down, and it was down for a large part of the season. We finally got it fixed. There was a major leak, and so the pumps were off, water wasn't flowing, and we're hoping that there won't be a leak this year.
So my question is, would this include any potential capital projects, or would staff acknowledge that this society could come back to the city for any large projects that might be infrastructure projects that might be required?
Well, you're anticipating a need for an irrigation system or some changes to the irrigation system, and that's not here. It's not here because we were going to prepare a proposal and bring it to council, actually bring it to staff first, because we always go to staff first. We were anticipating bringing a proposal forward. The leak in the main fountain intruded in our considerations, and so we won't be bringing anything forward in the near future.
However, just if I could check with staff, this would not preclude the Kitchener Hort Society coming back to the city with a proposal regarding infrastructure. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
All right. I fully support the 2% increase based on the rationale provided here, and you do fantastic work. And I think it's the second highest number of registrants in Ontario. Is that right?
Largest. This is the largest Hort Society in Ontario.
Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all the questions. Thank you, Mr. McNeil. We can move on to item number 5. There is a recommendation on this. Councillor Seelock moves the recommendation. Galloway, Seelock. Do we have any questions or any comments? Councillor Singh.
Thank you. It's not necessarily on any particular item in the report. It's more to get a more holistic perspective on support the City of Kitchener gives out to its arts community, especially from the earlier item, speaking to the Creative Enterprise Initiative, which pegs its onset from the per capita funding that we've been supporting as well for the last few years. I think it would be helpful for the future budget meeting for council to see exactly how much monies through our different tier funding is dedicated to specifically towards the arts community. Just going through the list here, this is, I think, only a small group. Empty Space, 12,851. The Museum, 110,000. Try Pride, 4,000. Kafka, 33,000. These are rounded numbers. The Grand Philharmonics, 11,000. Homer Watson Gallery, 211,000. Again, this is just to name a few. So I don't know if this needs to be as an issue paper, but as part of the budget for staff to give indication for groups as specific to the arts community, arts and culture community. Through our different tier grants, how much does this corporation dedicate? Does that need to be as a
Mr.
direction, or
Mr.
staff
Wilmer?
can provide that now?
Through the chair, and I shouldn't speak on behalf of staff, but I think it's information we would want to provide, but I don't know if we want to limit it to just the Tier 1 grants, because a lot of our arts investment is from other sources and through other channels.
Please, thank you.
So if you're looking for an all-in,
All-in.
I think we'll do our very best to give you that all-in summary.
Okay.
So
Thank
that'll
you.
be a budget issue paper for final budget day in January.
Okay.
And to give credit, this is from a discussion I had with Councillor Davey, so I don't want to take something away from him, but something that he had a question in mind as well. So it's not just from me, it's from his too.
Okay, that's fair enough. Councillor Fernandez?
Thank you. This is just comments, right? It's not questions?
Sure.
Okay.
You can make a comment.
I just looked at the increases, and I think staff's done a good job on keeping in line with the inflation. And I know for some of these groups, just knowing that they're going to get that consistent funding is really important to their livelihood. And I think, I didn't have any questions this year because I think we've done a really good job. And I just hope that these organizations are able to continue, because I know a lot of them do some really great work. I'm just turning the page to the Festival of Neighborhoods and, the Blues Festival, of course, and the Multicultural Festival, and all of them. Yes, this weekend I was at the KW Woodworking Shop, and the pride that those gentlemen and ladies take in the work that they do is incredible. And I know that without our support, they wouldn't be able to carry on. And there were family members there that were really proud about the work that their family members who were woodworking were doing there. So thanks for what I think consider a tight grant process, and I appreciate that. Thanks.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Just 2 points. I think it's known anyway, but I would suggest if any member of council is looking at changing any of these, obviously between now and definitely Monday is the time. I'd much prefer that than dealing with it specifically a budget, even though it is referred to it. Secondly, I wanted to comment on the comments from Councillor Singh on the issue paper. I think it's a good idea. I'm glad Mr. Wilmer mentioned everything that we do. And I would also ask that I think we might have done ourselves a bit of a disservice publicly or in terms of communication by bringing forward the dollar per capita, because there's a lot of folks out there that think that's the accurate figure of how much the City of Kitchener actually contributes, when it's several times that. So I would ask for that figure to come back as well. And I think actually Councillor Urbanov is going to bring up an appropriate relevant sports initiative. Thank you.
Mr. Verbanovich, go ahead.
Thanks. Just further to Councillor Singh's request, I think if we're going to look at it from an arts and culture perspective in terms of grants, we should, and so on, we should overall, we should look at it from a recreation and sports perspective as well, so that we're looking at the full picture and not just some of it.
Mr. Wilmer?
I guess then the question becomes, where do you stop? Because there's economic development investments as well, which I think probably would be a useful comparison for sports, recreation, and arts and culture. There may be more, but those are the ones that pop to mind immediately. Well, you've already got that. It's your budget.
Well, I guess my point is, the argument that very quickly ends up happening once you start looking at arts and culture is how that compares usually to sports and recreation. And both are essential and both are key. And so instead of sort of leaving one hanging, I'm suggesting that I think we should have that entire picture in front of us, so therefore there isn't any question afterwards.
Councillor Gazzola.
I just want to put my voice in. I don't disagree with where we're going. I think we've had this in the past, and I think we should have everything on the table. So that's...
Okay. We don't have any more...
I guess the only other thing, just if I might, we often, and it's often done, and it's more difficult, but to try to compare ourselves with our brother and sister municipalities, but that gets to be a more difficult thing, but maybe staff can give some thought to that.
Okay, so we don't have any more questions. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. You want to take that motion separate? Zig. Okay, and okay. Okay, so we'll deal with item on page 4-9, the Kitchener-Waterloo, sorry if I make a mistake on the name, Symphony Orchestra. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Move on to item number 5, and it's the Art and Culture Sustainability Funding. You have a question? You want to buzz in? Go ahead, Councillor Seelock. Galloway Seelock.
I have a question actually with regards to the Creative Enterprise Initiative, the $36,000. I think.
Mr. Regier?
Well, I was anticipating that Heather was probably going to answer it.
I saw that
so.
Mr. Regier had
Yeah, that's okay.
clicked in.
So there it says, I just kind of want to understand more what the anticipated use of that $36,000 is going to be in the 2014 year. I know it says leverage mid-career. Can you just give a little bit more detail on that?
Sure. The criteria that I understand from the City of Kitchener in terms of those dollars are related to small to mid-size festivals or events or activities, so in support of that. And we, in the history in the first year, it was match and exceed, which we did, and last year, certainly we've more than exceeded it. So the dollars, we haven't earmarked exactly individual entities that they would go to per se, but we absolutely direct, in fact, Creative Enterprise directs the bulk of all of our activities to small to mid-size festivals and events. So whether we're still sorting through what those plans are.
Okay. And so that's the amount that increases because of the dollar per capita, right?
Correct.
Automatically.
Yeah.
And it usually always goes to CEI because we haven't given increases to the other 3 organizations that we fund, which would probably be more of a question of staff. As we've been doing this for a number of years, the museum, the art gallery, and the symphony have all stayed at the same level of funding, and it's CEI that is the one that gets the increase as the population increases.
Through the chair, yes and no. Yes, the museum, art gallery, and symphony have been the same throughout. No, in the sense that CEI didn't always get the additional. Started as 20,000, then went to 31, 36. I think the year that it was 31,000, it went to CEI. Last year it was 36,000, and council reallocated 8,000 to 10,000, I think, to a couple of groups that came specifically to speak to council. And I think CEI got something like $25,000, $26,000. So, I think there's really only been 2 years that the funding flowed to CEI, and it actually went down in the second year.
But historically, I guess when staff come forward with recommendation, that additional fund goes to, but it's at the discretion of council then if we would like to divide that up.
That's correct.
Okay. And so I guess my question then to you, Heather, is obviously we gave you less last year. I'm hearing some of those answers. And if I understand the way that you guys operate, if we were to give some of the other arts organizations this on a permanent basis, you would accept the amount that you have and be able to do whatever you could with it, even though you'd like more money than less money at the end of the day?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay. So if we give you less than $36,000, you would do what you could with it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm where I'm coming at with that question is if there's another organization that we wanted to add to our list of 3 to permanently fund, you would still get money, but there's another organization that we may be able to fund directly through the sustainability funding. And you don't, that's not really, I'm just trying to give you the context of where I'm coming from. So it's not really a question, but you will use the money that we give you to assist small to mid-sized organizations.
Yes, I would, and if I can make a comment on that.
Sure.
That the investments that we do make and the work that we do, I think it's all about aligning collectively. So wherever the dollars do go with other grant funding, that we would very much obviously like to stay status quo at the 36 and use those dollars in a way that helps to drive the sustainability and capacity building and the mentoring and that we do provide to those organizations. So it is about making them more sustainable and successful in their own right, and the ability that those extra dollars help us to do that. So whether it's helping them to, we've worked very, very hard in terms of focused effort on people developing their own consumer databases, the large number of festivals and events that don't track who their users are. So there's some really good work that we're doing at that grassroots level that is changing the way that these small to mid-sized festivals and events are actually operating, many of them. So it's just a plug for trying to keep as much as we can to create systemic change.
So if I understand you correctly, then you're saying that you're assisting some of the small to mid-sized organizations in attempting to be sustainable over the long term, and that's what this funding is going towards. So
100, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really good to understand that. Thank you.
You can sit down, thank you. We did have a delegation registered for, what's that? Go ahead, Councillor Gazzola. You have a question?
I have a number of questions.
You don't have no question? Okay.
I say I have a number of questions.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay. I'd like to, it's Mr. Regier, I guess, who wrote this report. I just want to refer to page 5.2, and it's the second paragraph where we're talking about when we increased the funding to arts, and this goes back to 2010, and we talked about we wanted to get $1 million more from the private sector, $1 million more from the municipal, and $1 million more from federal and provincial. Where do we stand on all of that? For example, did the combined region get $1 million more out of the municipalities? And what did we get out of each of them? I'd like to hear what's happened with each of those categories. That's what this whole new fund was for.
Yeah, through you, Chair Ioannidis, the $1 million, the dollar per capita from municipalities was achieved, and it's been achieved for the last number of years. I think it's worth noting that, in reference to an earlier question, that rural municipalities in the Waterloo region do contribute through the region's participation in this project and through core funding from the region to the CEI as well. So the $1 million has been achieved through through municipal governments. The increased participation from the private sector is a little bit more difficult to quantify. Obviously, Heather has outlined that they have a $340,000 commitment annually from private sector sponsors for increased arts funding. But I would suggest that it's not, that is not the entire story, but it will be extremely difficult to determine, what the level of private sector involvement in all of our arts organizations will be. But certainly the $340,000 annually is there, so we're about a third there. In conversation with Heather earlier, and I might ask her to address this directly, she indicated that there had been a clear increase in federal and provincial support for the arts in the Waterloo region, but I haven't seen the documentation of that. Maybe Heather, you can talk to that specifically.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Ms.
Oh, sorry. Yes, so it is a difficult trail to track, but directly in terms of what Creative Enterprise can touch, We know that there's been a net increase of over $100,000 in terms of grants that have come from the province into various entities that we have mentored. I know anecdotally through conversations with Peter Braid that they have increased the federal funding into the community, and it's something that's very much on our radar to try and figure out how we can track this in terms of increased funding right across the board. And the other element too is in terms of private sector funding that's also hard to quantify is increased sponsorship that may be happening as festivals and events are growing and happening within the region, and we're seeing great support from sponsors into many of them, but we don't have a direct handle on being able to track that either.
Thank you. So I'm hearing a lot of, we've seen the documents, but no one said, show me the money. It sounds like we've gotten a third of the million from the private sector and 100,000 or so from the senior governments. On the municipal level, we know that the city of Kitchener has put in about 236,000 to that million. Where is the other 764,000 come from? Or has it come from other places?
Through you, Chair Ioannidis, Heather may have a better understanding than I do, but the region and the other municipalities are contributing to that in equal measures on per capita basis, as far as I know.
Can you show me 700,000?
I'm just looking to see if it's in the document we did, and if not, I can send you.
No, it's not in the document.
Okay, I can send you the breakdown of what's been contributed for dollar per capita. We have that summary. It's on our corporate website, but I can send it to all the councillors.
So I can confirm that the region has met its dollar per capita incremental contribution, as has City of Waterloo and City of Kitchener. I'm not aware that Cambridge has, and I'm not familiar with anything that the townships may have done. But between Kitchener, Waterloo, and the region, it's very close to that $1 million number. I think it's between 800 and $1 million.
Okay, it would be nice to see those figures.
Okay.
To follow up on where we were starting out in 2010. Okay. Going back to Mr. Regier, on page 5.2, you talk about a chronic destabilization of the arts sector. What does that mean?
Through you, Chair Ioannidis, Council will recall that in 2008, 2009, we went through a period of where the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony in particular was most notably short dramatically on their funding requirements. Arts organizations across the Waterloo region have struggled, and a study by the Prosperity Council in 2009 documented that we were short on per capita basis of about $3 million in art funding for the arts in this region. Relative to other municipalities, including Hamilton and Ottawa and Toronto, the region provides quite a bit less funding per capita to its arts organizations. So I think that simply speaks to the fact that our arts organizations have struggled for core funding over the years, and we see that every year when we get their financial statements and see how close to the wire they operate.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions of the museum, but I'll save those. I understand they're coming to council next Monday, but I would like if staff could approach them. They have a most recent financial information is a July 2012 statement. There should be by this point a July 2013 statement, and it would also be helpful if there was a budget for the whole year of 2013. Also, in line with the museum, it states on 520 that the City of Kitchener funding is $69,000. I wonder if does that cover everything? From what I understand, they're in a building that's owned by us. I don't think they pay any rent or anything. And do we maintain the building? Is that the full amount? Notwithstanding the extra funding that they receive, is that the full amount of funding from the City of Kitchener?
Through you, Chair Ioannidis, my understanding is that the building contribution and in-kind is represented as gift in-kind there. The 120,000 cash is separate from that, but the building is included. The building costs and maintenance are included in the in-kind contribution.
Okay, I guess that's what I was wondering about. I would have thought that figure would have been somewhat higher than.
I'll go back and take a look at the numbers specifically. It may just be direct costs that the city incurs for building maintenance and operations, but let me confirm that for you before Monday.
Thank you. Okay, just moving on. A question on the art gallery. I was just trying to equate how we compare to Waterloo, and roughly the split on 524 shows that 80% of the funding comes from Kitchener and 20% from Waterloo. And I would have thought it should have been sort of 2-to-1 or 66-to-33. Is there some explanation for that, or are we going to just call it the Kitchener Watt Gallery in the future?
Mr. Wilmer.
We can report back with details on that, but by my vague recollection is this has something to do with the split on the clay and glass gallery, that there was a point in time when Kitchener did support and invest in the clay and glass, and I think as we shifted away from it, we took on more of the responsibility for KW Art Gallery, but we can confirm that before Monday.
Okay, yeah. All right, the other question with the art gallery, I'm just concerned about, we're running into deficits, and how sustainable is it all? Like, if I look on 529, we had a deficit fiscal year 2011 of 51,000, and then by 2012 it's 137,000. What was planned for 2013, and how long can we go on like that?
I clicked you off.
Through you, Chair Davey. The art gallery is here, and maybe I'll ask them to speak to this directly. But I think, just by way of introduction to this issue, I think that it's a good example of the conclusion of the report that there's a chronic state of funding challenge here amongst our core institutions that's going to continue to challenge us. But perhaps I can ask Shirley to fill in the gaps.
Yes, it's Shirley Medill. I'm the Executive Director at the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery. I did do a presentation on October the 28th, and one of the issues in that presentation was our deficit and the presentation of a deficit reduction plan that actually starts 2013 and progressively goes, it starts at $5,000 this year, $20,000 in 2014, and then $25,000 every consecutive year until it's diminished. We do expect that we're going to balance in 2013, where we work in the calendar year. So what's happening right now is that we're collecting the rest of our memberships, and our membership drive and increasing. And we've also put a revenue generation task force into place that also looks at other methods of revenue, and the community access space that we completed this year and we're launching as a rental facility to gain extra funds that would help with the deficit reduction.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I remember when you were here, and I just wanted a reminder of how you were going to get out of the hole, and I wondered how 2013 is going, and you're saying you expect to break even.
That's right, and and because 2014 is going to be a year in which we have to start looking at 20,000 in deficit reduction, we've already made some very hard decisions on what that budget's going to look like.
And you mentioned it, and I want to just go back. I had overlooked this new space of 120,000. What is that?
The community access space used to be, to give you past history, it used to be the art bar. And when the art bar moved out of the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery, we used it for programming, and we received a number of requests from the community to use the space. And these requests came from dance companies, music, and so forth. But we couldn't meet their needs because, on one point, we had to get a liquor permit if you wanted to serve liquor, and we were only allowed 14 a year. And the other component was really about our audio and the technical aspects. So what we did was we went through a capital campaign, a small one, to raise $120,000. We received money from the Good Foundation, from the private sector, and we were ready and also from Stantec. And we were ready to go for a federal development renovation infrastructure fund for matching funds, which we received. So what we've been able to do is replace the flooring, do the upgrades in terms of the plumbing and the electrical to get up to standard, and also do the audio technical requirements and the blinds and so forth. So it was launched on September the 23rd. All that's left to do are really, new chairs, for example, a few movable purchases. And so now we've gone through a capital, we finished the campaign and we're doing a marketing campaign to sell it.
So the work is all done.
The work is done.
You haven't gotten the money yet?
The money for the work is done. As I said, we got all the funds to renovate it, so it's completed.
Okay. The only other question now is there a duplication of effort here? I don't know. Is there, like, there's space at the center in the square, is there not, for small venues? And is there space at the Conrad Center? Or
it varies. The spaces are different depending on the needs. So, for example, we offer additional elements to it. So, for example, if a corporation was renting the space and wanted to engage in a tour, we offer that as a means to connect the community more to what we do in the visual arts. So it's also a more intimate space. It allows, for the screen and presentations for panel discussions. And so in that sense, it's suitable to that. So I don't see this as a duplication. I see it more as an addition to what is offered in the community. And I just want to say that our goal overall is to build a community around this gallery, and the more that we can engage, whether it's the arts groups or the community groups or the corporations or the business community, the more that we also engage them with what we do.
You're not competing with our market space, are you? Isn't that, don't we have an area there? I don't just... I don't blame you for what you're doing. It's just questions that need to be asked, I think.
Of course.
Through you, Chair Ioannidis, we don't see the gallery as competition. We have a very different product concept, and it's very closely linked to the local food industry here in the Waterloo region, and I think the development of programming space associated with our contemporary art collection is an important contribution to the space inventory for events in this community.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. So now, do we have all the space we need, or are we still short of space for that? I'm not sure if I'm able to answer the question
it's, as the community grows and as the community changes, our space requirements change. Certainly we are seeing a dramatic increase in the utilization of the Kitchener Market space. I think the gallery is going to have some success with its programming of this community engagement space as well. Whenever we look at Communitech, its space is always being utilized down at the hub. So I think our community utilizes its space resources when it becomes available.
Okay, thank you. The only other question I have relates to the symphony, and I understand they're coming to council next Monday. I'd like to ask the same as from the museum. They have a fiscal year end of July 31st. The most recent figures we have are the July 31st, 2012 statements. Pardon? Oh, okay.
Everybody got a copy of it.
Okay, fine. Okay, I'm sorry. I was looking at this. That's fine. So you don't have to do that.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Zer. Carl Zer. Mayor Zer.
You get it, yes. Just if I could ask of the gallery representatives, since they're here, and in dealing with the additional monies and the comparison from the communities, the municipalities, that question came up a little bit earlier. And my recollection is, and I'll have the discussion a little bit more carefully with Mr. Wilmer later, the relationship with Clay and Glass and the changes is slightly different than what he commented, but I may be missing a part of it. As I understand it, it was when they were going through the recessionary period, and when Waterloo was taking on more of a direct responsibility for Clay and Glass, they put some money in there, and they reduced actually the Kitaway Art Gallery's budget. And this is going back quite a number of years, and rather than it directly involving the city of Kitchener. I guess, I'm aware from comments that you had made to me, Shirley and Judith, about the approaches that you were making with the city of Waterloo. Can you update us on what their commitment is for 2014?
2014 is at status quo, as they were last year. We have an affiliation agreement with the City of Waterloo for a 5-year period, and also sustainability funding. So we receive 55 plus from the City of Waterloo, plus 18,000 for sustainability. And we know that will be the case in 2014. However, we are looking at a possible increase for 2015, and we're doing strategic meetings to move forward with the City of Waterloo with an increase.
Okay. Just quickly going to your financials. And I'm looking at, this is for 2012, of course, 5-29. And then, is there a note, maybe that's page 12, the breakdown of those grants? Yeah, there it is.
Where are you right now?
Now I'm on your page 12 of the financial statement, our 5-38. So I see the 58 and the 18 there. I was looking at a different figure earlier, and that's what was why I wanted to go back to the financial statements. So that's consistent with what you've just said. So 14 is going to be status quo?
14 is status quo.
Okay. And then our 249,000, is that correct? Is that would include the facility rent of 92 something?
92.
Okay, that's 131. Yeah, so we're not in the 2-to-1 ratio that we often had been, but it's just something that I think we really need to work towards in a lot of these KW arts organizations, and it's not just we who have some input into that, of course, it's our partners in Waterloo. I think that may become another observation when the report comes back to us related to the full amount of Kitchener's putting into arts and culture and to Recreation. That's the next obvious question that will come. Thanks very much.
Councillor Yaneski?
Probably to the Creative Enterprise and staff. In the recommendation on page 5.1, we've got four organizations: the Museum, the Art Gallery, the Symphony, and CEI, noted here to total $236,000. And I recall in the past that the Museum, Art Gallery, and Symphony have always asked for the same amounts, the 120, 40, 40, as shown on the next page. And so this is a one-time allocation, yet it seems to be done every year. I'm puzzled on that. Help me understand that.
Mr. Wilmer?
Through the chair, so just to be clear, this was not an ask from those organizations. This was really the Prosperity Council, through the Creative Enterprise Initiative, approaching local governments to say there's a gap and municipalities need to do their part in closing the gap. So the cornerstone organizations were a key part of that. So that's where the numbers came from in the first place. It was pretty much the city saying, we're willing to invest, say, $120,000 in the museum, not the museum asking us for $120,000. All of them would probably ask for more, frankly. So that's what we're committed to. But we want to make sure people don't see this as permanent funding. And so that's why we're calling it one-time funding. It's again one-time funding. It's multiples of one time. But really what we're saying is that beyond 2014, there's no certainty for this funding.
Did we say the same thing that in 2013 at the budget time?
I'm not sure, actually, but even if we did, we want to be abundantly clear rather than just being clear. But I think up until now, and I think we've heard it in the council chambers today, people are referring to this as permanent funding, and it's not. And so we want to either make sure that these organizations can either wean themselves off of it or become less reliant on it, or see that we're also willing to invest in small and mid-sized organizations. But we realize that none of those organizations is really at a point yet where it could be still sustainable if we started to withdraw that funding. So that's some of the work that we need to do in 2014.
Okay, and maybe just to follow up on that total of $236,000, when I look at the next page in the top paragraph, or sorry, page 5-3, it talks about $1 per capita in terms of funding from the population. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and I thought the population is around 220,000, but the figure seems to be 236, or is the population now 236,000?
Yes, the population is 236,000.
Okay, so it's grown from last year, then whatever amount it was?
Actually, it was 223 years ago, then to 231. It was actually at 236 last year.
Oh, it's 231. I see it there. Okay, I missed that line. Thank you. So for Creative Enterprise, they asked for $36,000. Sorry. And in the previous earlier this afternoon, when they and report number 3 that we had before us when they were looking at their operating grant, they're saying they're not asking for any increase for next year because they'll stay at $56,000. So when I look at that, so that's 56 and 36, that is up to be a 92. Yet when I look at page 5-64, the statement of operations, I had 87,000. So I'm assuming that for 2013, that 87 will become 92,000? Or 94, 2014, I should say?
That's probably a question for Heather, but I think that in 2013, because council reallocated $8,000 or $10,000 to other organizations, in 2013, your operating grant to CEI was $56,000, and your sustainability funding was something like $25,000 or $26,000. The city makes the distinction, though, that's not operating money for creative enterprise. That is to be reinvested in the community.
Okay.
And I think it's maybe more of a distinction on our part than theirs, because as Heather explained today, what they do in their operating is invest in the community. So, for us, this was another way to give grants to the community, and for them, it's a way to build capacity from their organization to invest in the community.
So would it be beneficial to have both of these figures really added up into one, just some figure, and let them apply for it as a whole figure, as opposed to broken down in two parts?
In a word, no. I think it's important for us to keep operating grants separate from sustainability funding.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Etherington.
I think we're still on questions, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. Then I'll wait until we have comments.
Okay. Councillor Seelock, Galloway Seelock.
You'll get it right one of these times, so I have faith in you. My question is to the art gallery, and sorry I didn't ask this before. I've been doing some thinking as there's been some questions asked, and sometimes it's scary when I do some thinking, so I'll just wait till you get there so that... my question to you is, do you cover all your rental costs, or do you get some of it subsidized through the center and the square?
The rental costs for the gallery, yes. We pay the rent to Center and the Square, but we receive the funding for the rent from the City of Kitchener.
Okay, can you say that one more time?
So the City of Kitchener's Tier 1 grant provides the $92,000 figure for the rent that we pay to Center and the Square.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. I guess I have a question of staff. Okay. Is it my understanding that the Center and the Square ends up subsidizing some of the costs for the art gallery?
Mr. Chapman?
Through you, Chair Ioannidis. It's my understanding that the rent that was just referenced is typically increased by the increase in the grant allocation year to year. It does not necessarily reflect the true cost of operating the art gallery within that facility. We could certainly go back and confirm or gather more detail, but my understanding from the Center and the Square is that they've attributed occupancy costs of about $130,000 a year for the art gallery space. So the rent covers $90,000. The balance of that really would be picked up within the center's budget.
Okay, so I think it's important that we end up getting more information on that for Monday, but would it be fair as a potential recommendation to look at giving some money to the Center and the Square in order to offset some of the deficit that they have because of the costs of the true costs of the art gallery?
I don't see anything that would preclude council from doing that, and certainly it would improve the sustainability of the center's operation if they are not carrying a subsidy within their budget for the art gallery.
Okay, well then I will ask staff to look at the implications of reallocating $10,000 of the CEI sustainability fund to the Center and the Square in order for it specifically to go towards helping with the costs of the art gallery, and get that for Monday if that's possible, please.
Okay. Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is going back to some earlier questions, and when Mr. Wilmer had answered the, I guess, the long-term allocation of funding to these organizations. And I was very comforted by what you said, Mr. Wilmer, that obviously the intent is, I'm not sure I got it right, the intent is these organizations do wean themselves off of the support. And speaking to that, we've been giving the same monies over the last 3 years. Can that weaning start? Or when do you think when that weaning would start?
Mr. Wilmer?
I think that's what we will try to get a much better handle on through the work we do in 2014. I think at this point it does seem clear that none of those organizations is at a point yet where they could consider themselves sustainable if we started to withdraw the funding immediately. So I don't have an answer for you, but I think the answer is not now.
And I realize I'm being unfair by putting you in that spot by asking that to you, because this is my opinion, and I'm not trying to get into comments, getting to a question later on as well, is that, but the scope of these organizations will only broaden and increase as our city grows, as well as the user base grows. So, and that's where the question, wouldn't that need will always be there, a certain level of deficit will always be there. So ultimately we will continue to subsidize, if not even with a greater demand tomorrow than it is today.
Through the chair, I think that's a fair statement, certainly for the foreseeable future. Long term, I guess we can always hold out hope that they can become truly sustainable and break even, but that's not, I think, very likely in the short term.
Okay, all right. One last quick question. Were these organizations, remind me, we decided to do this, the allocation, per capita funding allocation, part of 2011 budget. This funding was absent before that. Were these organizations in jeopardy of, I guess, failing at that point?
Now, I didn't have direct involvement at the time, so if there's others around that either were more involved or have a better recollection of it, I'd welcome your input. But I think the folks from staff who were involved are no longer with our organization, so it may be members of council that have the most informed memory of this issue.
My memory is that increased funding was recommended. By the Prosperity Council. It wasn't, so it was my understanding that it wasn't that they were in a dire situation, of course. They welcomed any increased funding, unless I'm incorrect.
Through you, Chair Ioannidis, certainly the Symphony was an extremely dire situation and received emergency funding by the city and a number of other stakeholder organizations at the time when this, and that in my memory tells me that that really kicked off a series of conversations about what the sustainable level of funding needed to be to keep our core institutions and grow our arts community in the city. The Prosperity Council work was important to outline the relationship between the arts community and building a prosperous economy, and they determined through their analysis and through consultations with numerous stakeholder organizations and individuals that the Waterloo region was not as a whole contributing at a sustainable level to the arts.
No, and I hear this, and we've heard that messaging over and over, and I'm not disputing it. And I'm just trying to see that there is still a lot of other organizations that have a desperate need, and we need to consider of broadening that or reallocation. That's Councillor Galloway-Sealock is kind of alluding to. Actually, one final thing came to mind was for the component of the Creative Enterprise Initiative for the sustainable funding towards that, allocating to be leveraged for mid-career organizations. Now, if this was prioritized internally, we're not taking anything away, are we? We're not taking anything away from Creative Enterprise, other than the control being with them. I'm saying we allocate the same, or we go enter into discussion of how to allocate it, or do we still have to allocate that portion? But that's for a later date. But something that Councillor Galloway-Sealock has suggested. We're not doing any disservice to CEI.
So I'm afraid I don't understand the question. We're not taking anything away if we do what? If
we just reallocate ourselves to priorities to other organizations, instead of leaving that control towards CEI.
Maybe it's a question for Ms. Sinclair to answer, but it seems to me if we were to allocate $10,000 to Centre in the Square for purposes of the art gallery, it's $10,000 less that we're allocating to CEI, so $10,000 less that they have to be able to support and invest in the arts community.
Right. we're just perhaps deciding which component of the art community.
Right.
Okay. In a roundabout way, you did answer my question, so thank you.
Councillor Gazzola, do you have a question or is it a comment? Okay, we'll have one more question and then comments are up. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify from Councillor Galloway's request for information is coming back. So the idea is the $10,000 that she mentioned would be going to the center, so it wouldn't materially help the gallery at all. I mean, in terms of there'd be no financial benefit to the gallery. It would really just bring the actual value of the rental property closer to reality. That's my understanding? Okay. So, okay, that's enough. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Etherington had buzzed in earlier for comments. Go ahead, Councillor Etherington.
I just wanted to ask through you, Mr. Chair, when we get to that point, I would like to break out the CEI allocation and vote on it separately.
CEI portion vote separately? Yeah. Okay. We're only on voting on two because, yeah. Councillor Gazzola?
I don't understand we're only voting on two.
We're deferring Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony because they're not here to speak on their behalf.
Oh.
And the museum now?
Well, okay, that's fine. I'll give my comments. My comments stick, whatever you do. I will not be supporting this recommendation, period, because, and I don't have a problem with the $236,000. That's a commitment we made, and at the time, going back to 2010, I thought that the whole idea was to help all the arts and cultural organizations in our community. I'd never saw it as helping 3 or 4 organizations, and fine, the first year that's the way it was, and then it's just carried on from year to year to year, and you know, if it was really, we really want to wean people off, we would have given X dollars year number 1, year number 2, we would have said X minus Y dollars so that they could start to look for other areas or other ideas. So I'm not opposed to the funding for arts and culture. We need that. We committed ourselves to the 1% policy. We did that. I agree with it, but I was always of the understanding that this would help all our arts and cultural organizations, small and large. And that has never happened, and we just keep spinning our wheels and going in the same direction. So I won't be supporting the recommendation. I support the amount, but not the way it's been allocated.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. I was just a bit puzzled about the whole benefit of removing the $10,000 from the CEI over to the center. I'm not really understanding who that's benefiting, except it's taking money away from Creative Enterprise, which, in my understanding from the presentation that was given and from what I've read, they are actually helping more organizations than if you just look at the museum, the art gallery, and the symphony, not taking anything away from what the work that they all do. So I'm a little bit puzzled, and I don't know that I would necessarily support that, because I just think it's almost like a shell game. We're just shifting money from one area to another. I had a really hard time when I first heard about the whole concept of sustainable funding, $1 per capita, but I'm starting to understand better the rationale behind it. I do think that it would be wonderful if these organizations would be able to stand on their own, but in looking at even galleries in Europe and museums in Europe and arts groups, they're all being subsidized. They're all having difficult times. They're all dependent on their municipal governments. So although I really still have a bit of a problem with it, I think it's a commitment we made, and maybe in ensuing years, we maybe need to start saying a percentage less in 2015 and incrementally lower at that time. But I don't think we can start doing that today or for the 2014 budget. I think we have to start preparing them for that and prepare for the fallout, because the reality is that if there's no art gallery and there's no museum, then we're going to hear from the public that we don't have these services or these community venues that many, many people value.
Thank you. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much. And I really value the model that the KW Art Gallery is espousing, because they're not only saying in principle that we want to wean off of grants, but they're actually specific about how they're going to do it. And they have a plan, and it's wonderful to say a motherhood statement about we want to be self-sustaining, but unless you're specific, it doesn't mean anything. I really believe that we should support these organizations, but I also agree that it's important to convey to them that we're looking for a plan for them to stand on their own. And in the meantime, this is a fragile time for them, and we do need to support them. However, they have to have a vision and the leadership that has been demonstrated by the Art Gallery. So kudos to you on that model. I think we need to challenge all the organizations that are getting this funding. I will support this recommendation, but we do need to challenge the museum and the symphony and the CEI. Now, in terms of the CEI proposal to reduce that, I fully support the $36,000 going to where it's going. I think that we've heard from a number of councillors around here that it's really critical to support the small to medium-sized organizations. This does that. I don't want to reduce that funding. I do support the Centre in the Square, but I think we need to have that debate separately for transparency purposes, as well as to challenge them about what their plans are. So I really do support the fact that we do have a plan in place here to support these organizations today, but we need a vision for tomorrow, and I do appreciate the model that's been espoused by the Art Gallery, and I think we need to challenge all the organizations to get in line with that.
Thanks. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Based on Councillor Galloway's request and my own interest, I would actually like to defer the CEI portion, so I guess we'd only be actually voting on the Art Gallery portion. I want to see the information come back. I would actually rather see that, I'll be clear, I'd rather see the $10,000 go to the gallery, and then the gallery and the centre, if they want to work out any rent increases, that's great. But I wouldn't be supporting any more funds going to the centre and the square. I think I've been very clear on that. So I would move deferral then of the CEI allocation as well to council. Sorry?
The motion's not even on the table yet.
Oh, pardon me. I thought it had been moved. Apologies.
If you want to prepare to move one. Okay. No, nothing's been moved yet. Mayor Zaire?
Yeah, I was going to move just to be clear, the recommendation that is on 5.1, with the exception of the symphony and the museum to be deferred, those two items to be deferred until December the 9th, 1 week today. And I will be supporting the Art Gallery for 40 and the other 36,000 as is proposed. And I would not support a further $10,000 to Centre in the Square. It camouflages the problem even further, because what would happen is the $10,000 that we would take out of this, and then we give it to, as Councillor Davies says, give it to the Art Gallery to give to the Centre in the Square, which means that the Centre in the Square will either have $10,000 less of a deficit or $10,000 more of a profit, which is really the City of Kitchener. So that is a shell game, and it washes. We would be giving out $10,000 less. That's the end result. Having said that, as a separate issue, I do believe that organizations, we should have, if we're renting facilities, they should have the full rental costs included in that. Because what we are doing inadvertently by giving a $92,000 grant for the art gallery for its rent to the center of the square, when the costs are much greater than that, we, the City of Kitchener, are subsidizing the art gallery to an even greater extent related to the City of Waterloo, the other funder, as Councillor Gazzola was starting to point out. And I think that that true cost needs to be there, and then we need to have those kinds of discussions with our partner in Waterloo and say, this is the real cost of the art gallery. What's your share? What's our share? But until that happens, we, the City of Kitchener alone, are subsidizing it at an unfair amount. So that's a separate discussion and outside of this one. I know this has been very controversial, but if you go back to the very beginning of how we arrived at some of these figures, was that there were certain foundational organizations that there's no point in starting new ones, and no point in giving false hope to newer organizations if we don't maintain the foundational organizations within our community. And that's what this was about at this point in time. We envisioned through the Prosperity Council's activities to be further ahead than we are today. And that's a disappointment that we're not. But we are where we are. And so there are more organizations that I think that will be, going back to my first point, that will be supported by leaving the $36,000 as it is than not. I think one of the reasons why I am supporting this for 2013, or 14 rather, is that we need to finally and specifically do that review in 2014. Interestingly enough, it's sort of a side, I don't know that it was, I didn't go back to our corporate plan again to take a look to see where this would fall. But maybe this is one of those things that we specifically have to do in 2014 so that we don't get ourselves into the same position a year from now when we're talking about 2015 and beyond. So that's absolutely vital, but this year I think it would be less than fair, less than showing goodwill if we did not support the recommendation as it is there. And I guess so Councillor Davey has moved it in that respect. I would not be in favor of deferring the question that Councillor Galloway-Seelock has put forward and deferring the CEI because of the reason that I have just stated. That is just shifting things around, and it's our money that we'd be shipping back to ourselves.
Okay. Mr. Wilmer, you have something to comment on?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, request for clarification. So staff are willing to go back and do the work on providing more information about the operating costs for the art gallery and finding that for council. But if council members are starting to talk about not wanting to go that direction, maybe it's clearest if that's an amendment to the motion so that we understand where council is coming from on whether we need to do that work or not.
Mayor Zaire?
Yeah, I would suggest that now that we have the original motion on the floor, that Councillor Galloway-Seelock perhaps, if she wants to still, put that forward as an amendment, as a request. I personally won't support that for the reasons that I've stated, but I think in order to deal with it, then staff knows exactly whether they're doing some review or not. The review I was talking about in terms of the rentals is a completely separate project, quite aside from what we're doing here for 2014, not for this budget.
Okay.
So perhaps Galloway-Seelock can...
As of right now, she's not. You want to do a comment? Yeah, there's two for comments. Okay. Councillor Etherington?
Yeah, I missed the opportunity to make this comment, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to know that I too completely support the art gallery. As a member of the board since I've been on council, I've watched as they squeeze and very efficiently use every single dollar. So I wanted that on record. So they completely have my support. The if there is no deferment, I would still ask that as I asked before, that the Creative Enterprise Initiative amount, the allocation be voted on separately from the art gallery amount.
We can vote on that separately. Councillor Davey?
Thank you. With respect to Mayor Zare's comments, my concern about it being, I guess, taking $10,000 out of CEI and putting it towards the art gallery being a shell game, it's not necessarily a shell game in my perspective, because we're talking about $10,000 leaving the organization or staying in to balance deficits within. And I am of the opinion the funding is going to go to arts and culture regardless. I would rather see an organization that's in deficit have a clearer path to get out of that deficit. So pending Councillor Galloway's preference on adding his amendment, I think I would just, to be clear, I don't want to see it going to the centre and the square. I'd rather see it go to the art gallery, and the centre and the square can continue as they have to work out their rent agreements. So actually, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to amend that $10,000 come from the center, from CEI, which, to be fair as well, my understanding from Mr. Wilmer's comments is they had that exact amount of money or a little bit less last year. So we're not decreasing how much money CEI had last year in this. It's the same amount of money, a little bit more. And we would be increasing the art gallery's amount to work with their deficits, which is less of a deficit on all the taxpayers.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
In light of what I'm hearing around the horseshoe, I was just trying to look at a way to help all our organizations be sustainable, but again, that was me thinking on my feet, and sometimes that doesn't always work, and it might not make sense then to bring the center and the square into the equation. I just saw it all as arts organizations with sustainability funding to try and make them all sustainable. But I can live without getting that information, but I do think it's important to continue to support our arts, and I think this program's really good, and I do like the second clause that we have that review for the Arts Culture Sustainability Fund for future years. And I will support the amendment by Councillor Davey to increase the funding for the art gallery of $10,000.
Okay, we don't have any further questions. Recordable, okay, first I'm going to make a comment. I think at the end of the day, for me, it equates to quality of life, and I think the dollar amount is the perfect amount for per capita wise, and I don't think I'll be supporting the amendment myself, because I agree with Mayor Zare that I think we shouldn't be tinkering with this. I think we should wait till the review and just move on forward until next year. And with that, we have recorded vote. So first up, we will move, is it the amendment? Okay. Sure.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. I'm not sure what Councillor Davies asking. If we're talking about the art gallery getting $50,000 or reducing, I'm not sure where we're at. So moving the CEI number to 26 and adding 10 to the art gallery.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mayor Zare?
If you allow me, I think, so you don't get yourself in a procedural issue, quagmire. I think you have to take the amendment to increase the art gallery by 10 and decrease the other, not the 50, because whether it ends up being 50 for the art gallery or 40, some may wish to vote against that. You have to take just that point separately.
Okay. Well, with that, we will take that vote as far as the 10,000. Okay. I can't see anything. With that, motion fails. Okay, and so we will move on to vote on the CEI separately. So we'll move the CEI as as is. Those in favor? Recorded vote. I'll do
Frank has CI to be separate.
Yeah. Just CI.
I don't think that's supposed to be on.
Technically, it does.
And that is carried. And the last item is the original recommendation with the deferral of the other items. Just the art gallery. All those in favor? Recorded vote for all. Is this recorded vote for all of them? Okay. Sorry, I didn't.
I think you need to be reset.
She needs to reset.
It's all good.
The art gallery and the two deferrals. The museum and the KW Symphony, they're not here to speak on their behalf, so defer. Yes. And the art, well, he knows the art gallery because they're here. And that carries. And thank you, everyone, for a lovely afternoon. That concludes the Community Infrastructure Service Committee on time by, well, just now on time. Thank you. What's that? Yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure, yeah.